Nigeria's revenue from oil has been dwindling in the past few years, and there's been a lot of efforts by the state government to result and grow the internally generated revenue. How well have they succeeded in that?
The revenue from oil is dwindling. Our oil production, the daily output is dwindling due to security challenges. Of course, all the vandals also vandalizing pipelines and all that. Clearly, that has made some state governments to focus on what they can generate internally. Some states have done very well. Lagos State, for instance, if you look at what Ogun State is doing, it's also very impressive. And I think they've made a progress in that space. But I think there's more that needs to be done. We need to encourage people, the citizens, to realize that there's value in paying taxes. Many people still want to avoid paying taxes if they have the chance, and you can't really blame them. I think it's also a concern from the point of view that do they get value from the ones that they paid. Talking about infrastructure, people have to create their infrastructure. People, if you look at the educational system, the health system, so there's concerns generally with the citizens that are they getting value for the taxes that they are paying. I think the more the government can do in that space, then there will be motivation for people to come out more, and then it's voluntary, so they can even, pay the right taxes without much coercion. But the people need to realize that you need to pay your taxes. The government needs money to put the right infrastructures in place, to invest in the educational system, to invest in the health system, and that ultimately will contribute to the development of the economy.
Has there been improvements in tax compliance?
Yeah, I think there's been improvement. Again, there's also room for more. If you just look at the rebased GDP in terms of the ratio of the internally generated revenue from taxes to the GDP, you find that it's gone down, it's declined. And I think that's one area that the Minister of Finance is also concerned about. You need to focus on that. But again, that is in relative terms. In absolute terms, when the base increases, the ratio will drop definitely when the base expands. But having said that, I think there's more for governments to do to drive compliance. And there's also more for people to realize that you don't need to be pushed to pay your taxes. As I said earlier, once you realize there's value in paying taxes because government needs this money to improve the infrastructures, to invest in healthcare, to invest in education, then people will realize that it's important and that we pay taxes. But on the whole, I think there's improvement, general improvement.
Nigeria is now the biggest economy on the African continent. What does that mean for us?
Good and bad, so to say. Good, from the point of view that, of course, it's going to attract some investment because it's a big economy. People want to invest. The foreign investors want to invest in a big economy. Nigeria is currently the largest economy, as you just said, with a GDP of 510 billion US, ahead of South Africa, ahead of Kenya. Even it's now the 26th largest economy in the world, ahead of Austria as well. It moved from 33rd position. That is good news for us. But what I think the real issue is that how does that affect the ordinary man? How does that affect the ordinary man on the street? Does that mean prosperity for our people? Currently, I don't see that happening. Because if you just look at the absolute number alone, then it will be misleading. You should have to look at the relative GDP per capita. So if you look at that, South Africa is still much ahead of Nigeria. South Africa, the GDP per capita is still over $7,000, right? Nigeria is about 2,700. In fact, even Gabon, small Gabon, is still ahead of Nigeria. Gabon is over 10,000 GDP per capita. So these are the issues. I think what that means is that Nigeria needs to ensure that the wealth of the nation is more evenly distributed. And because by the GDP rebasing, we are now a medium-sized economy, right? Because the average of the GDP per capita of $2,700 means we've moved away from the very poor and the poor countries, the very poor countries. That also means that some areas that normally will come to us by our initial classification as poor and very poor countries will no longer come. For instance, by our current classification, we are in the same space with Brazil. Brazil currently is a member of the BRICS, right? Brazil manufactures steel. Brazil produces 20 times the electricity consumption that they need. We are still struggling. Brazil actually also produces an aircraft right now. So we need to move our infrastructure level to that point where people can begin, to experience prosperity based on the size of the economy. So we need to deal with the challenges around infrastructure. We need to invest in infrastructure. We need to invest in deal with the issue of security. We also need to deal with the issue of corruption, the big elephant. So the reason why the wealth of the nation is concentrated in the hands of very few people is also as a result of corruption. If you just step back a bit and look at the improvement that has happened, if between 2004 and 2010, China, for instance, they improved the level of prosperity of their people from 85% to 13%. What I mean, people living below poverty line. That's what I mean by level of poverty. People who are living below poverty line, and as defined by the World Bank, that is people living below $1.25 daily. Between 2004, China moved from 85 to 13. For the same period, Nigeria went up instead of going down. Nigeria went up from 52 to 61. What that means is that out of 174 million people we have, 110 million people actually living below poverty line. Whereas for China, with a population of 1.2 billion, only 172 million are living below poverty line. And that is how people should feed the wealth of the nation. So it's not just that you have an absolute number of 510 million. How much of that money is distributed evenly? And because in most countries where revenue comes from oil and gas, it's concentrated in the hands of very, very, very few people. Because oil and gas is not a large employer of people, naturally.
But how do we distribute this wealth?
It's about leadership. How do we ensure that the country actually gets value for all the revenue that the country generates? That's a big question. So it's about leadership. Leadership must fight corruption. Leadership must ensure that the budgets are proper, they are spent, and they actually spent on items, on areas, on sectors, that would create value for the people. Infrastructure is a big area that we need to develop. Electricity, invest in power, invest in electricity, invest in roads and rails, invest in even agriculture. Because the best way to actually transform the lives of the people, if you want to alleviate poverty, is agriculture. So agriculture employees contributes almost, before the rebasing, contributes almost 39% to our GDP. I don't know what the number has come to now after the rebasing, but that just tells you investment in agriculture has a multiplier effect to spread, wealth. But the big issue to just answer your question, is leadership. Leadership to deal with corruption, because corruption is what siphons the wealth of the nation into the pockets of very few people.
Taking a look at the capital market now, there's been a slowdown in foreign portfolio investment. What's your take on this?
Yeah, two issues really. If you look at in the oil and gas space, which is the biggest part of, in terms of, that has always been the biggest attraction for foreign investors in the oil and gas space. So the PIB, there's been slowdown in passing that bill, and a lot of apprehension around that. Because of that, the multinationals play in that space have sort of, let's wait and see. So it's a wait and see game that you'll be seeing. So it's a wait and see game, and in the process, the money, even the investment, that the funds that were meant to be invested in this country has been diverted to other countries, which is shameful. So that is one. Second point is security. Insecurity is a big challenge. Every day you wake up with one incident or the other. So sometimes you actually wonder whether it's at war. So once there's no security, nobody wants to put his money in a place. Don't want to invest your money in a place where there's no security. So that's a big issue. So the government, we need to fight the issue of, we need to deal with security. How we do that, don't ask me, because I don't know. I don't have a solution. But it's a big issue, and I just pray that we don't, it doesn't become worse than what, because already it's bad already. I don't know, because you wake up every day, you don't know what to expect. So that has to be dealt with. Then the government has to expedite action in passing the PIB.
In terms of investor confidence, what is the level right now?
I think Nigeria is still very, very attractive to foreign investors. It's a huge market, 174 million people. That is huge demand. And markets will always attract, large markets will always attract investment. So that is a large market. The population is large. The potentials are there. You know, natural resources, oil and gas is there. The people, Nigerians are very resourceful people. So the human capital is also there. And the growth, the returns on investment is high. This is one of the few economies that are returning 7%, doing 7% growth annually. It's very, very attractive. So Nigeria continues to be an attraction for foreign investment. But we need to deal with all the challenges around improving the level of infrastructure, making the right investment, dealing with the issue of insecurity, and also dealing with the big elephant, as I said, corruption.
We are in the earnings seasons. We've seen companies quoted on the market, on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, filing in the reports. What's your assessment of these earnings?
Yes, I think the reports are good, depending on the sector. If you look at financial services, still very good earnings. The consumer, those are operating in the consumer and retail sector, still very good earnings. Manufacturing is struggling. The real sector is struggling. And that is why I said earlier, we need to do something about the bank's ability to lend to the real sector. Because the manufacturing, the real sector is what is going to drive the real growth. What's going to actually transform the growth of the economy.
Okay. On this note, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Egbike, for your time with us.
Thank you very much. Thanks, I appreciate your coming.
And as usual on the program, before we go, let's bring you some business tidbits. If you run a small and medium-scale business, one important area of interest is that of finance. As important as it is also an area that remains confusing to business owners. There is usually no long-term plan in place for SMEs. Reports say 48% of small and medium-scale enterprises find their finances complicated and confusing, while 40% are burying their heads in the sand when it comes to their financial affairs. If this affects you, then these tips may be of help to you. The first thing you need to do is have a financial plan. A clear business plan will establish where you are and where you want to get to over the next few years. This should be backed up by financial targets, budgets, profit and loss, and cash flow forecasts. You should monitor the progress of your business regularly. On a daily basis, you should know exactly how much money you have in the bank, how many sales you're making, and your stock levels. Every month, you should review your position against the targets set in your business plan. The term cash is king cannot be overlooked, as even the most profitable companies can grind to a halt if there isn't enough cash to cover the day-to-day costs such as rent and wages. Know the minimum your business needs to survive and do not go below this. Keep your books up to date weekly. All paperwork should be completed, else you not only risk falling behind and ending up in a mess at tax return time, but you could risk failing to invoice a customer and losing out on money. And finally, don't bury your head in the sand. If your business is heading towards financial crisis, don't ignore it. Seek professional advice as soon as possible. And that will be a package on the program. We appreciate your comments and questions. You can send them to Business Incorporated at channelstv.com. And you can also join me on Twitter. Thank you for watching. I am Bolaji Akinwale.